afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the City Council Study Session meeting of Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. I now call the meeting to order. Everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the Okay, so Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Mayor, the record will reflect that all council is present except for Councilmember Marr.
Okay. So we'll now do public comments, and unlike a normal meeting where public comments can be anything other than what's on the agenda, here please confine your public comments to the item that is on the agenda, which is the fiscal year 2024-25 proposed budget study session. Everybody gets 2 minutes, and we can start. Anybody want to come from Chambers? And we'll go to Zoom after Chambers. Yes, ma'am, you have the floor.
Yes, I want to be up here and try to advocate for more staff in the building planning department. A number of residents have come to me and complained that they can't get their buildings building. It's costing them money out of their pocket because of the delays with permits and inspections. And this isn't just one person. I've had 4 people in the last 3 weeks. 2 of them in District 1, 1 in the West Side, and 1 in Mr. Harlan's district. So it seems to be pretty evenly dispersed that they're having lots of issues keeping up. There's no liaison that follows a case through and follows up on it and makes sure these cases are running through. So I'd like to offer a challenge for you to, if you're not going to have more staff, to issue an anonymous poll to everybody that takes out a building permit and see what they think of the process compared to other cities. Because I think you're going to be surprised that Costa Mesa is not very well thought of in their building and planning department, and it's costing the residents money.
Thank you very much. So anybody else within the chambers that wishes to do public comment? All right. Anybody on Zoom, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Close public comment. All right, just to, before we read the title, just to remind everybody, you know, your study session rules apply. We can, if we choose to, call each other by the first names and dress more casually, and everybody will get a chance to ask all their questions after our staff presentation. Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
This is the fiscal year 2024-25 proposed budget study session. Presentation by Ms. Molina, Finance Director.
Carol, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I want to take a moment before I present to you the 24-25 proposed budget to thank staff. As you know, each budget cycle requires an all hands on deck, not only from the finance staff, but from all of our colleagues in the other departments, all of our analysts, department heads, city manager, and obviously finance staff. It takes countless number of hours to put this together for you tonight to ensure a fully balanced and fiscally responsible budget. So to get to tonight's numbers for 24-25, our theme is when we all pull together. Tonight we'll review our 24-25 proposed budget guiding principles, some of our revenue highlights, as well as our expenditures overview, the status of our general fund reserves, and our budget calendar. As you know, the 24-25 budget was inspired by our strategic planning goals, strengthening our public safety and improving our quality of life, our housing, diversifying, stabilizing, and increasing housing, advancing environmental sustainability, recruiting and retaining high-quality staff, and achieving long-term fiscal sustainability. Our new strategic planning goals will be presented to the Council at an upcoming study session and will be formally adopted thereafter. For our 24-25 proposed operating and capital improvement program overview. A couple of our highlights. As always, we always ensure that our budget is structurally balanced without using any of our general fund reserves or ARPA. We designate over 52% of our general fund resources to our public safety departments, our police and fire departments. We invest approximately $28 million into our parks, streets, and active transportation network, facilities, and other city infrastructures. We annualize our negotiated labor contracts, and we funded the $2.5 million into a housing trust fund. As you're aware, the city has multiple types of funds. Our general fund is essentially unrestricted, and it's our general operating fund of our city's coffers. We also have special revenue funds, which consist of grants, whether it be federal, state, county, which are essentially restricted. We can only spend those funds in certain areas as restricted by the particular grantor. Our internal service funds, they're essentially our internal activities, such as our equipment replacement fund, which funds our fleet, self-insurance services, which funds workers' compensation and general liability, and our information technology replacement fund, which funds our aging infrastructure in software and other IT-related items and projects. For our 24-25 all funds budget totals $240 million. It's essentially a 3% increase over our 23-24 budget. In our Housing Authority Fund, we transferred $2.5 million from the ARPA fund into our Housing Trust Fund to help address housing affordability. Just as a side note, this will fully commit our ARPA funds, so we're fully committed at this point. We continue our funding for our homeless outreach and bridge shelter programs of about $1.3 million, transferring $222,000 from ARPA to support the additional year our tenant eviction protection program, $230,000 to support our homeless program funding, and we've also incorporated the bridge shelter for behavioral health bridge housing, about $900,000, which is a reimbursable grant from the county. In our IT replacement fund, funds about $1.9 million, $1.5 of which goes to year 2 of a CAD RMS public safety, $250,000 for a desktop replacement program, and $130,000 for the city's upgrade to our website. Our self-insurance internal service fund adds about $50,000 in administrative costs, mostly going towards our premium increases. In our Arts and Culture Master Plan Fund, essentially, we funded about $394,000. It's essentially flat funding year over year. There is insufficient cannabis revenues to support the expenditure. However, this particular fund has sufficient fund balance from prior fiscal years to help offset the next year's deficit of about $115,000. For our energy and sustainability category, we're allocating about $300,000 for our water quality program in the general fund for public works. We're also doing tree planting, small tree care program, $150,000, some quality trash full capture systems of about $115,000, and a grant for our clean mobility options program of $500,000. We're also requesting a couple of new positions. In our Housing Authority Fund, we're requesting 3 new community outreach program workers. We're offsetting those 3 new positions by reducing an outreach program in our tenant protection program and a code enforcement officer. These positions are vacant and they are not needed at this time, for it's only a 1 FTE increase in our other fund. In the general fund, we're requesting a part-time position, an accounting specialist 2, to support staff with processing invoice and accounts payable. In our police department, we're converting a part-time accounting specialist to full-time to also assist with a higher volume of transactions there. And our public works department is requesting a part-time maintenance worker to support the signs and marking division of the department for a total of 2.62 positions, only 1.6 in the general fund. Moving on towards our CIP funding, the greatest share of our CIP funding is $8.9 million from the general fund. Gas tax of 1.9 of RMRA is $3.5 million. I won't go through all of these. They're here before you tonight for a total of $27.9 million. We also have in the CIP an estimated future bond financing of $20 million for our 2 fire stations for a total of $47.9 million. Some key CIP highlights includes the emergency communications facility remodel for the police department, an HVAC replacement for the senior center, a rehabilitation project on Harbor Boulevard, 17th Street and Gisler Avenue, an underground project for Adams Avenue, and a signal modernization improvements. We're also putting forth the 2 potential bond financing for Fire Station 2 for $10 million and Fire Station 4 for $8 million. A couple of other public safety related CIPs is some various updates in fire stations throughout the city for about $150,000, $900,000 for the emergency communication facility, $400,000 for the police locker room, some weatherproofing in the police department's main building, as well as some sewage liner replacements for our communications and the west side substation. We also set aside some money, $300,000 for the police west side substation renovation. Breaking down the CIP by category, you will see we have $11 million dedicated towards transportation, $5 million for facilities, $1 million for parks, a little bit under $1 million for parks, ways, and medians, and $9.2 million for our streets. For our general fund, our adopted 23-24 budget was $180.3. We're amended at $181.1. For our proposed budget, we're coming forth with a $189.9 million general fund proposed budget, a $9.5 million increase, or 5%. Just a high level for our revenue sources. We're seeing an increase in our property taxes, and this is mostly due to the successor agency dissolution. We used to get about $1.5 million in the successor agency loan repayments. That is now being redirected into our property tax, and we have increased property taxes by our normal 4% year over year that we normally see. Our sales tax, as I'm sure you've heard, is declining a little bit year over year. I'll go into that a little bit more into further detail. We're anticipating about a 1% decrease, mostly related to the reduction of purchase of goods and moving on into the services. Our TOT is coming a little bit higher, about $500,000, and some of our other revenues are coming up by about $4.5 million. Our Measure Q is essentially flat. It's a little increased because we are expecting a couple of new cannabis businesses, and we have seen some of the cannabis businesses coming in towards the last couple of months, so we're seeing a little bit more of that revenue. And then our transfer in, this is a transfer in from ARPA in the current year that's essentially funding the second tranche of ARPA into our CAN and the IT replacement fund that only covered that second tranche. Since that second tranche is fully committed, we are no longer doing a transfer in into the general fund. For some of our revenue highlights, essentially we have reducing our sales tax. Our property taxes is reflecting a 10% growth. Our fees and charges are estimating at $13.1 million. This is probably one of the largest increases. It's due to some statutory changes and ambulance fees being returned back into the city. Our cannabis taxes and permits are essentially about $3.4 million, $350,000 increase from the current year, and a small increase of our TOT as a result of increased travel. This is our breakdown of the pie chart. You can see that our sales tax is essentially the largest share, coming in at $81.5 million, followed by property tax of $60.4 million, and you'll see all of the various fees and tax categories. This chart provides you a historical view of our sales tax and property tax, since they are both make up the largest share of our revenues. As you can see, our sales tax, we are projecting a little bit of a decline, essentially still growing year over year, but we are expecting a little bit of a decline. But our property taxes is definitely higher, and we are continually seeing that. I did want to mention, you probably received a little bit earlier today, the governor's May revised budget update. As you can see, the state of California is estimating about $28 million deficit in the next 2 years. I'm sorry, $28 billion estimate over the next 2 years. And the governor has brought forth a plan to address this deficit. The majority of this deficit is related to some of our some of the reductions into taxes. As you can see, the personal income tax we do not have a personal income tax in the city, so that would not affect us, as well as the corporate tax. They are seeing a sales tax forecast decline. However, they are projecting an increase in their next year's budget for sales tax. So we're being conservative. We budget conservatively here. We are not doing an increase at this moment in time. The state is. The state of California is also using their budget stabilization account by about $12 billion to help offset the deficit. They're also eliminating about 10,000 vacant positions. They are going to start that process in this new fiscal year and will continue into the second year. They are also reducing the behavioral health and bridge housing program by $132.5 billion in the first year and $207.5 billion in 25-26. It is important to note that at this time, we do not expect that the city's contribution from this program to be reduced. This is mostly, as it was explained, due to any new programs. For our general fund expenditure line, we are essentially balanced, with over 52% of our general fund going to our public safety. We are requesting a net of 2.62 positions in all funds, of which 1.6 is in the general fund. We're also fully annualizing the 3.2 FTEs that was approved at the mid-year in April. We're funding a total of $6.8 million in the general fund toward capital projects, $2.8 million for our Lions Park debt, for a total of $9.6 million. We have annualized our labor contractual negotiations of $5.8 million. We have $2.3 million in CalPERS year-over-year increase in the general fund. We have some contractual obligations of $1.4 million in the general fund, which includes our elections, some of our software contractual increases, our Lions Park security increases in the Parks Department. And we're also continuing our $4.3 million vacancy factor for the Police Department. This is just a reminder of the general fund overview. You can see that we're increasing by about $9.5 million. I did want to highlight the transfers out. This $3.4 million reduction in transfers out is simply a realignment of the general fund's contribution into the equipment replacement fund. In order to be consistent with GAAP, we realigned it into internal rent, which is part of the operating budget increase. In strengthening our public safety, as you can see, we're over 52% into the public safety departments, while the balance of the departments is broken out here. 12.5% is going to public works, development services of more than 5%, parks almost 5%, IT 3%, and so forth. In our police department, we have sworn staffing levels of 142 positions, the highest since the Great Recession. We have other annualized enhancements in our police department, which includes the reallocation of an account specialist 2 to full-time, increasing our salaries and benefits budget by $3.1 million to fund our contractual labor obligations, over $1 million for new vehicles, and the creating of hiring bonuses and incentives for our police officers and dispatchers to match our surrounding agencies. We're reallocating about $730,000 for body-worn and vehicle camera system, $150,000 for a brand-new wellness program, $120,000 in contractual obligations for our wildlife wetlands, our animal services contract, over $1 million for their fleet, and we've annualized 3.27 positions that was added at mid-year, two FTEs that were converted from 3 part-time positions in the police department. In our fire and rescue department, our sworn is at 85 positions. Their salaries and benefits increased by about $1.3 million. We have a new budget allocation of over $700,000. We are receiving the revenues via the ambulance program for net neutral impact, and $95,000 for a light truck. In recruiting and retaining high-quality staff, we have fully annualized all of our labor contracts, bringing them to average market rate levels for an impact of a $5.8 million in our general fund, $2.5 million in all funds for our annual CalPERS payment, $400,000 towards our police and fire departments for our recruitment and retention incentives. And we are in the process of negotiating with CMFMA to be followed by CMDMA, confidential unit executive, and city council. In achieving long-term fiscal sustainability, we're a structurally balanced general fund budget without using any reserves or ARPA. We're maximizing our economic recovery through strategic investments. We provide full funding for our CAN and our IT replacement. We're continuing the $1 million in debt payments for the potential recommended bond for the fire stations 2 and 4. For our fund balance, as you can see, we've exceeded the $55 million City Council policy for our general fund by $4 million, and we anticipate continuing into the $59 million as we end this fiscal year. For our financial achievements, we have strategically utilized all of our ARPA, which have included small business grants, rental assistance, Project Home Key, tenant eviction protection program. We've dedicated 1.5% towards IT replacement fund to address our aging technology, software, and equipment. We have dedicated the 5% for our capital improvement program to address our maintenance and repairs of our facilities and infrastructures. We have exceeded our City Council Reserve Fund policy of $55 million by $4 million, and we have maintained our city's underlying AAA rating and a AA rating on its 2017 lease revenue bonds, which puts us in a really great credit position as we embark on looking into new bonds. And then this is our budget calendar. In April, we went to FIPAC and to the City Council. We presented the CIP. We are here before you tonight for our study session on the proposed operating budget, and we will be going to FIPAC tomorrow, and then coming back to the City Council on June 4th for the first public hearing. If needed, we can come back on the 11th and the 18th. So with that, turn it over to questions.
Thank you. Great presentation. Council? Who wants to go first? Okay. Somebody red light. You had some questions.
I'll go.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Don.
I always go first.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Carol, page 6 of your agenda report. At the bottom, second bullet point from the bottom. I'm thinking.
Are you looking at the slide 6?
No, I'm looking at your agenda report, the
Oh.
printed one. And
Yes.
second bullet point from the bottom, is that an error, an additional 500 million?
Oh, yes,
I'm just-
sorry, it's 500,000.
I
The million
figured
should be
that.
not there. You're correct.
I just wanted to correct that.
That is-
Make sure
thank you.
got it. On page 19 of your slideshow, I didn't mean to demean it by calling it a slideshow, but presentation. That works right here. This one works. Yeah, that works. So tell me about transfers out. That's like an expenditure, or is it moving the money to a budget?
So the 9.7 includes the $6.8 million towards the the capital, and then the balance goes to the IT replacement fund. So essentially it covers the 5%
Right.
to the capital and the 1.5% to the IT replacement
Oh, so that
fund.
covers our, I get it. So it covers the can budget.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's all it's made up of.
And in this budget, there's no 20 million for bond financing. We talk about the bond financing, but that's not,
Correct. That's why we delineated it and we
Yeah.
separated it out, so you can say that's a future bond financing, but it is not included in our budget at this moment.
got it. This is I'm surprised that sales tax is going down, because I thought with inflation, I've learned that inflation seems to be good for government, at least in the short run. But why is sales tax going down?
We have seen a decline in building and supplies. With the interest rate increasing, we have seen that people are not taking out refinancing on their homes and so
So
forth.
they're not
and-
remodeling their kitchen
Correct.
or
They've-
or John's bathroom or my
Correct.
closet, anything like that? Is that the big hit?
The big one, and then there's a reduction of sale of goods. So people are, instead of purchasing goods, they are going for an experience, going out to dinner, maybe going to the theater. They're realigning their expenditures. So the reduction of the sale of goods, merchandise, we're seeing a slight decrease year over
So
year.
increased rates for maybe home equity loans, people aren't taking those out and spending it on home improvements.
Correct. So there's a reduction of home
Wow.
home
And that's
improvement.
pretty significant.
Yes.
What about in the retail sector? Have you looked at the retail sector? Like, I don't want to call it the wrong thing. It's the South Coast Plaza, not a shopping mall. What's the impact there?
Unfortunately, I cannot share that information. Per state law, cannot provide you the information to specific sales
Good answer.
tax
Good answer.
information.
Can you give me a broad retail answer?
Broad retail, there's just a slight decline.
Okay. So the big chunk is, okay, got it.
Don, while we're on this topic, do you mind if I ask a quick
not at
question?
all.
So I was at the budget workshop for OCTA. They were describing this thing that Don's talking about and you're talking about, is how there is a slight decrease, and they say it's really very unusual to have 3 quarters in a row of soft income tax, and it's really only happened in, the recession and the 9/11 and COVID. But the thing that they said on the bright side is, if you look at the projections from 2019 and where we thought, at least at OCTA, we would be, because there was such a high jump of sales tax in 21, 22, and 23, we're actually way above where we thought we would be 5 years ago. They track that data there. Do we track that data that actually, this is like, the difference is, this is more like a correction. There have been 3 really strong years, and this is a slight correction.
That is correct, too. And we also keep in mind that all of the ARPA money has been fully expended, even those that went to individual people. So at this moment in time, there's that correction as well that's happening. So yes, this is a correction. We are seeing it, though, year over year, a slight decline, even though it's not, thankfully for us, of too much concern.
We're in the tail end of the stimmies.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're also very conservative, so we budget conservatively.
Thank you, Don.
No, thank you. It's a good question, John. When I buy on Amazon, and my wife never does, I never do. Where's that sales tax dollar go? Is it a full sales tax dollar, or do we just get a portion of that?
So the sales tax dollars for online shopping, like Amazon, goes to what we call the Orange County pool. And from the pool, it gets reallocated to the cities based on how much the city's brick and mortar stores sell. So
Really?
that's just a high level. There's much more detail on how that gets broken
Right.
out. But high level, that's how that works.
So if we have a decline in our retail brick and mortar, we would lose a piece of that.
Correct.
That's pretty important to know
Yes.
for this council. I didn't know that. Page 21, tell me what ambulance fees are. Sorry, slide 21.
We have an ambulance program, so when the ambulance, they said you call 911, the ambulance shows up and transports you, the transportation program, we bill for that. And
Okay. And who are we billing?
it depends, sometimes we bill the private insurance, or we bill the state if we're transporting Medicare, Medi-Cal patients.
Got it. And those rates went up. Slide 24. I'm going to pick on the state. What does it mean to eliminate 10,000 vacant positions?
For them, I'm not quite sure where those 10,000 vacant positions are being eliminated. I know that they're in the process of eliminating vacant positions across all the departments within the state.
Maybe I should understand what a vacant position is. Like, I know what a vacant seat is, and if I eliminate it, nobody goes, but
Correct. So essentially, they're positions that there is no full-time employee actually working in that position. So it's, for example, I have a vacant, let's say, accounting specialist 2 position.
Right.
Well, because there's nobody hired and working in that position currently, that's a position that they're assuming that they would get eliminated.
So do we have any vacant positions in our budget?
Yes, we do.
We do.
Yes, we do. We have vacant positions. We have, we
But they're in the
average-
budget, they say we're going to spend it, but maybe we don't spend it? You guys look
Correct.
guilty, I can see, no, I'm teasing you. So they're vacant, and they're in the budget,
Correct.
we may just never fill them.
Well, they're vacant for the intention to be filled,
Sure.
right? So we fully fund all of the positions with the assumption that the departments will fill all of them.
Okay, last year, how many vacant positions did we not fill?
I think we average about 60 vacant positions
A year?
a year.
My head's spinning. I don't know how to do a budget where I'm budgeting to spend something, but I never spend it.
Correct. So it's across all departments. So at
I'm not
any given
blaming
time,
anybody.
we won't know where those vacant positions will lie.
Yeah, but you budget for them.
I do budget for them, but keep in mind too that some of the departments, for example, Public Works and Development Services, will use that vacancy savings to help offset, so they'll bring in contract employees or a contract to help fulfill that service until that position is.
You guys have to keep track of that? Like,
Yes.
you have to keep track of that and
Yes.
go, it has to be for that, can't be
Correct,
to buy a new wardrobe.
correct.
You guys are dressed really well, by the way. I think it's great. I was thinking of that. Sorry. Page 31, or slide 31. It was page 31. What's the word reallocation mean to me? I'm looking at the first line. When you say reallocate, you take, what are you taking from somewhere to somewhere, right?
Correct. So in this case, we had inadvertently double budgeted the jail services. The jail services contract was still in the police department. They were able to use that contract funding for this program. However, keep in mind that we brought those positions in-house, so all of those positions are fully funded.
Okay. Second to the last one, page 34. I think I saw 400, third bullet, recruitment, retention, I guess it's all lumped into one, 400,000 for incentives. Can you talk about some of the incentives and what the succession planning is and how I come up with the 400,000? Is that a consultant? Is that free
No,
lunches? What is that?
This is our labor contract with our sworn
Okay, fair enough.
positions.
Fair enough. Okay, it's part of the labor contract. Want to describe what that
Mm-hmm.
bullet point means exactly?
So essentially, for some of our sworn positions, as they hit certain milestones, if they've been with the city for 10, 15, 20 years, there's a percentage increase accordingly. So
So you're I guess you're calling out pay incentives.
correct,
They're built into the payroll that are going to show up in that line item.
correct.
You're just calling it out. Say,
Yes.
this is why we're doing good. Gotcha. I think for now, one broad question, and I think it's fair that I ask it, is that, it'd be great for this council, I think, to see, I know we install this TESA system and you do all this good work, but I would ask my employees this and my staff, I would say, where's my cost reduction? And I try and live by, I'm going to spend some more money over here, I'm going to find a place to save it over here. Did the TESA system create any staff reductions, any efficiencies where we have less payroll?
I think the short answer is no. The TESA system it's a convenience for our customers, but there is still significant work across all departments to be able to sustain what we currently have. So there was no reductions as a result of TESA.
Didn't reduce anything, don't see it reducing anything? Raj is shaking his head like, no, got nothing to do with this. No, I'm kidding. But it's a better customer service tool.
Correct.
For the
And it's an online system. It has improved efficiencies within departments, but it has not reduced positions.
just as it resulted in reductions. Okay. John, I'm done for now. Thank you.
Just a follow-up question to that. And maybe this is, I don't know, for Steve or for you, Carol, are we looking at any new technologies, I mean, that would do what Don is saying, because you read about AI and things like that, and I don't know whether we're looking into those applications that would actually streamline process to the point that we would be saving money and,
Currently, as you may remember, we're about to embark on a new ERP system, which will provide more efficiencies. I'm not too sure it will save FTEs, but it will increase efficiencies and allow staff to be freed up for, trust me, there's a lot more other work to be done. So,
Sorry.
No, and I mean, and it's not just about like cutting FTEs, but it's also I'm not sure if I should say the public person who talked in public. It's also being able to improve our throughput and our bandwidth and being able to respond faster, those types of things. It's not all about
correct.
cutting, it's about doing more with less or with the same, doing more with the same.
So we have seen efficiencies in TESA. We do expect to see much more efficiencies with the new ERP system, with the reporting tools, even the internal management of finance will obviously improve significantly with the new ERP system. So all of the systems that we're looking at is essentially slated to do that, to become more efficient, more modern, to current state, which will provide for better programming, better reporting, better services.
If I could add one more thing, so it's me up here. I have to say this officially every time. Is I would love to see some performance indicator over the last 4 years that says, this many employees, we spend this much, or this many employees, here's our cost per employee, here's our cost per 1,000 residents, and here's where it's trending. And to John's point, I agree with you, John, it's doing more, if I can prove we're doing more. And Mary Spadoni stood up here and said, hey, anecdotally, it seems like people are complaining about late building permits. I'd love to see something that says, hey, here's how quickly we're processing building permits on average. I know it doesn't say the whole story, but over time. But I see a budget. I'm a conservative guy, so I'll just say it politely, but revenues go up, we spend it all. And it just, it kind of drives me crazy a little bit. And I'm concerned about inflation. I'm concerned about a recession always. And we got a pretty tight budget, in my opinion, because we're spending it all. I know we're doing some good things, but I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Okay, who's next? Lauren.
Thank you. So when we first were talking about the cannabis ordinance several years ago, one of the things that we had talked about putting in there was a 0.5% tax, not only for arts, but for a first-time buyers program. So I was wondering, one of the things we needed to do still was kind of draft some language to see how we would implement a first-time buyers program utilizing that 0.5%. Where are we at with that? I don't see anything listed in here as far as how much money has accrued, based on the conversations that we had. So if you don't have an answer right now, that's okay. But I would like eventually to address that. If we have to save it for the next meeting, that would be okay. But that's kind of like my single question for now. I want to see where we're at with that.
So to answer your question, Councilmember Gameros, yes, the first-time homebuyer program and the Arts and Culture Master Plan have been appropriated with that 0.5%. To our knowledge, at this moment in time, the first-time homebuyer program has about $230,000. We're expecting at the end of the year. That's accumulation since Measure Q came on board. Where obviously has not produced a lot of financials at this moment in time, but we can come back to you at a later date with a program once that monies get a little bit more fluctuating more evenly in.
That's fine. And that 0.5% that's not a shared percent with arts. Arts gets their own 0.5%, and the first-time buyer program is completely separate, right?
That is correct. They each
Okay.
get a 0.5%.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for now.
On that one, real quick, why is there a higher number? I think you had in parentheses $393,000 for the arts, and you just said 200 and whatever it is.
238,000.
Shouldn't those numbers be the same?
So yes, but keep in mind that we're on the revenue side, they're both the same. They're both allocated at 238,000 is what we're expecting on the revenue in. On the expense side, the Arts and Culture Master Plan has a higher expense because it actually has a full-time employee and some programming in there. So we are requesting to utilize fund balance from within that same fund to make that budget whole. So you will see a little bit of higher increase on the expense side because we have the Arts and Culture Master Plan to fund.
So you're saying the discrepancy between the arts and the first-time home buyers is basically we're subsidizing the arts with some other revenue?
So in the prior fiscal years, we have transferred over some monies into the Arts and Culture Master Plan to help ensure it can fund the Arts and
Right.
Culture Plan. That has resulted in some savings and fund balance within that program over the last couple years, and it's been sufficient to be able to cover 24-25 expenditures on top of the 0.5% of cannabis.
Mayor, in other words,
I don't understand that. I'm sorry.
so in other words, if you may recall, we started the half-cent tax rate for the Arts and Culture Fund, if you will. And then what we started doing is funding each year of the Arts and Culture Master Plan in that fund, so we could keep those expenses wholly contained. And I think the first year of the Arts and Culture Master Plan may have been like $100,000, but we didn't get that much in cannabis revenue, but we expended that. And I think there was a transfer from the general fund. Council stated that they wanted to take action each year to decide how to manage that, whether to peel back the Arts and Culture Master Plan implementation or to transfer general fund funds in. So for the first couple of years, we had to actually transfer money into that fund from the general fund so that we could fully implement the Arts and Culture Master Plan. And now we're at the point where it sounds like it doesn't need a general fund transfer. It has enough from previous year's general fund transfers and the cannabis tax revenue to be able to fund the appropriation for next year.
Okay, I got it.
So that fund
the
actually has
three-
two pots of money in it. It has
Right.
general fund and the cannabis tax.
Yeah, now I get it. So the 395 represents kind of the commingling of general fund money and cannabis.
That's correct.
Money. Got it. Thank you.
Can I follow up on
Yes,
that?
of course.
So does that then include expense for staff, or is it just implementation of
There
the?
is one staff member that is in the Arts and Culture Fund as per the Arts and Culture Master Plan
Okay, and so we're funding that essentially through the cannabis tax.
and general fund, yes.
Okay, but at some point, the general fund will be expended, so we're just left with an ongoing revenue source of cannabis tax,
Yes.
which will pay for staff as well as whatever projects or initiatives.
Yes, that's the hope.
Okay.
Okay, Manny?
Thanks, John. I like waiting until the end, but Don asked most of my questions, but I have a couple things. to ask. First of all, I just want to say that for me, the guiding principles of being a council member are really simple. It's really down to three things. One, is our community safe? Two, is our balance, our budget balanced? And three, are we investing in the community? I'm happy to see that we're still investing in CMPD and fire department as well as in IT. I think it's more important as time goes on to think of IT as public defense because as we learned recently, while the attacks we get for malware, it's good to be aware that that poses a risk to the whole city as a whole. With that statement said, of our duty being say community, balanced budget, and invest in the community, I do have a few questions to ask. We see a slight dip in sales tax, and we see a high increase, 10% increase due to property tax. Do we have any plans in this budget or in the near future to look at the TOT as another revenue stream that we can potentially increase?
At this moment, there are no plans.
Okay. And if we were to pursue that option, what department would that go under, or who would field that initiative?
That would be the finance department, and that would require a vote of the people because it is a tax.
Got it. Okay. So that'd be a longer term project. That would all go into a ballot initiative. So we don't see that being an area where we can improve revenue streams.
At this moment, no, we haven't looked at that.
Okay. I just want to remind us that it's our job to make sure we're fiscally responsible. And I think one of the things to do as well having a balanced budget is also finding ways to increase revenue where we can without burdening our own residents. So just something to keep in mind. Next, going on to public safety a little bit. Great to see that we have 142 employees in the police department. How many more positions do we need before we're fully staffed in the department?
Which department?
Police department.
Are you asking how many vacant positions are within the police department? Let me research that. I don't think I have that at the top of my head. Let me ask the chief, sorry.
No worries. And yes, to clarify, I guess in a more simple way, how many vacancies do we have in the PD currently?
Thank you, Council Member. It's a fluctuating number. Our authorized staff that you budgeted for us is 142 sworn positions. Right now, we're down about 10 positions, but we have various people in the police academy, in the field training program. We have a certain amount that are injured at any given time, so it's a very fluid number, but right now we're down about 10 vacancies.
Okay, and in your eyes, Chief, is that number a concern, or is that a good number for us to handle the calls for service in Costa Mesa?
Well, it's a concern in regard to recruitment and retention, and that's why you see the city manager and the finances, one of the goals is recruitment and retention efforts in this budget, which I'm happy to see. That'll help us attract good quality candidates.
Okay, thank you. I think do the best we can, make sure we get the support we need. It'd be helpful, but it's good to know that we're, as the chief said, still have some people that recruits, and that's good to hear. I also wanted something that caught my eye on page 31 was also $150,000 towards a wellness program. Do you mind elaborating on what that program is?
I will turn that over to the chief again. This is in the police department.
I'm sorry, Chief. I should ask that sooner.
Thank you, Council Member. What we've discovered in the policing industry is really a need to make sure that we're taking care of our employees in a very holistic way. That includes mental wellness, physical wellness, physical well-being. And so this program is really wrapped around the holistic approach of an employee, particularly in public safety, where they're exposed to a lot of traumatic incidents and making sure that we're taking care of that emotional trauma that they experience over a 20 or 30-year career.
Okay, so this is kind of like a service we're providing to our officers, make sure they're doing well and able to do their job appropriately and effectively, correct?
It includes psychological well-being and counselors specific to public safety, as well as physical well-being through Hoag Hospital.
Okay, thank you. That sounds like a great program to have for our team. And then finally, I just want to follow up on one of the members of Public's comment about public works. Are we able through Tessa to, at least internally, to see how long it takes for something to go through our city system? Like, can we check a citizen's request, for example, for like another bedroom, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think we tried to design Tessa so that it would give us information about where a project is at any point in time and how long the lifespan is of that. And so there are different reports that can be generated that give different information. Trust that I think pretty much everyone who's involved in the development process, from development services to public works to fire, have been getting together to try to create as many efficiencies as possible through TESA, but also offline. And so we can come back with a presentation at some point on, what we find in terms of timeframes and things like that, and what we think are some better goals, if you will. I know that Cecilia is leading that effort right now as we speak, in order to set some guidelines for staff on what the turnaround time should be. And so we're right in the throes of that at the moment.
I'm glad to hear that we're already kind of pairing that approach. I think it's always good to be responsive to our residents, and that's something we've heard. So I'm pleased that there's already an internal process to analyze that. The only thing I'd ask for our residents is, as always, we're trying to strive to use data to make sure we're being as efficient as possible. And I say this mindful not only of our residents, but the fact that if you want to attract development to Costa Mesa, maybe economic development or housing opportunities, it's a good thing to show that we're efficient. So I see Don is already happy.
Can I help you with your question?
Yeah.
Which is a good one, and I appreciate it. But what I would say to you is you've got to test a system with a date something started and a date it finished. The date is there. If you wanted to pull the report to say, here's the date it was applied for, here's the date the permit was issued, there's a number of days it takes, and there's all the permits, and there's a list of how many happened every month and how long they took, and it's a moving number. And you could tell. You'd say it's 42 days, or it's trending up to 60 days. And thank you, man. That's the example that kind of when I say KPIs or performance indicators, that's the kind of thing I know exists within. If you want to create it, if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it. And I've been talking about it for years, and I know you don't want to do it, but that's what you're asking for. Thank you.
Yeah, and then finally, this one last thing I want to just see if there's moving forward with the budget, if we can do this. So one of the things that's really pressing to me is our park situation. I'm happy that we're investing in safety for pedestrians and for bicyclists. Parks is a big thing for me too, because there's not a lot of open space in West Side, and quite frankly, even East Side, if you think about it, in terms of like actual parks that are available. One of the things I want to see us explore, again, maybe not this budget, but down the line, is a way for us to systematically start investing in our parks in perhaps a rotating basis. Obviously, there's always going to be parks that need improvements or need new equipment. But to the extent that we're able to find a way to automate that process and not have to rely on either great partners in state Senate or state assembly and or community members rising up as a group, I think that'd be beneficial, especially as we still try to attract development, which historically has been how we've gotten park fund fees. Other than that, I just want to say thank you to staff. Again, you succeeded in keeping the community safe. You succeeded in making sure our balance is budget, and then we're investing in our community, which are all things I think are important for our residents to see. So thanks, guys, for the good work.
Thank you. Good questions. Arliss or Jeff, do you have anything?
Okay. There's no particular to order to this, but the budget was very organized, and I appreciated it. So let's start with the ARPA money. So we're using what looks like 2.9 million, which I think is the remainder to pay for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the tenant protection, eviction protection program, correct?
Correct, and homeless.
Okay, so the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is a one-time only. Once we use the ARPA funds for the eviction protection program, what's next? How do we fund that if we continue to fund that?
So we will be discussing that during 24-25, seeing what additional funding, if available, will be at that moment in time, and we'll come back to the council with options, whether it be general fund or other funds that we're able to secure.
Okay, and the amount that was used from ARPA for that program was about $450,000?
Correct.
Is that
total?
Is that the total program amount?
It's 222 for the tenant protection and 234 homeless.
Okay. And some of those positions for the eviction protection program are outreach. It seems like staff's requesting additional outreach positions. So looking at, sorry, it's a lot of paper here. Page, well, it's not really accurately numbered. I guess it's attachment 1, page 1, which has the city manager's office positions. So it looks like we'd have 8 outreach positions in the city manager's office. Is that correct?
Hold on. Let me get to that same page that you're at. Where are you? There's a total of 7 outreach workers and 1 outreach supervisor.
Supervisor, right. So the outreach workers, some are assigned to the tenant eviction protection. We got to come up with a better acronym. Are those fully, is the scope of that program occupying people full-time?
It would be, if the question, if they're full-time positions, yes. The answer would be yes.
Well, no,
the
sorry,
answer-
I wasn't clear. Are they doing that work full-time? Or
Oh.
is it, or are there other assignments?
No, so there were, when we did the eviction tenant protection ordinance, we asked the council to authorize 4 additional positions so that we could implement it. It was up to 2 community outreach workers, and we filled those 2 positions at the time, given the crisis that we had at hand, a code enforcement officer and a senior planner. The code enforcement officer position was never filled. That was in development services. We're recommending to have that position removed from the budget. There was no need for that, thankfully. The senior planner position was filled. We recommend continuation of that. The 2 community outreach worker positions were filled and initially did great work around helping with the tenant eviction protections program. Since then, the information that we have is that there's not sufficient workload to support that particular function, because at this point, there's a significant reduction in the number of families that are being evicted, and we know that the data supports that, of about 50%. And so we recommend that one of those positions be reallocated, if you will, removed from that program. There's enough work for 1. And then the request for the other positions is actually more around housing navigation at the bridge shelter. So separate program, no longer tenant eviction protection, but to add 3 positions, right? So we've eliminated 2 in tenant protection, add 3, you get a net of 1 for the housing navigation. So we can have more flow in our bridge shelter and get folks to housing quicker and be able to serve more people that are on the street currently.
Okay, and we're not, to my mind, voting on that tonight necessarily, are we?
No,
Okay,
but that's the recommendation in the budget.
okay. Kind of switching gears here. Business licenses. I noticed on page 5 of the staff report, we are estimating just under $1 million for business licenses next fiscal year. How many licenses does that total? And while you're looking that up, am I correct too that we have 1 flat fee? I think I've asked this every year. We have 1 flat fee for business licenses. It's something on the order of $200.
It's essentially about $200, yeah.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter size, amount of gross revenue. It's basically across the board.
For the most part, it's $100. So we process about 11,000 business license renewal notices and 12,000 annually that are either new or renewed. So we process about 12,000.
12,000. Okay. Okay. On the TESA, I appreciated Ms. Bedoni's comments on that. I have heard anecdotally, quite frankly, a mixed bag about at TESA. I've heard people very happy with it. I've had others that have struggled. We launched this in, I think it was August. Is that right? August of last year. So I would appreciate if we could come back and get a report. I mean, I fully expect there to be some kinks to be worked out, especially in the first year. But hopefully we've been able to make some adjustments. And I'd be very curious to see, to Dawn's point about, some indicators to show effectiveness, efficiency. My caveat is, for our purposes, let's not sugarcoat it. If it's not working in some areas, let us know. If it's excelling, great. We want to know that too. But it doesn't serve anybody well if it's just a foregone conclusion that this automatically is better for the city. I'm by no means suggesting we get rid of it. We've invested a lot in it, and I think it has value. I just want to get a better understanding of how it's operating. And then on, let's see here, license trust. Kind of a small item. There is in the parks budget an account for community gardens. I can't actually find a budget for that though. So is this strictly staff labor, or do we actually have money allocated towards community gardens?
Mr. Mayor, if I can answer that question.
Sure, Raj.
Yes, Roger.
So in the 5-year budget, we are going to be adding it. It wasn't there, it was missed. So we'll be adding a project for community gardens in the 5-year budget for future opportunities for that.
Okay, but what does that mean? That we're going to just put a placeholder somewhere over the next 5 years for funding for some undefined project? Or are we talking about potential acquisition for more another community garden?
It's a combination. It could be if there are any opportunities, if we can find that we can implement in any of our parks, for example, that's one option. Acquisition is another option.
Okay. I've fielded some requests from some constituents because even though it's not technically not my district, but there is a community garden on Del Mar, and people love it. They'd like to see a little bit more city investment. Mostly it's their own labor trying to keep it up. So I don't have a specific dollar amount, but we may, I think, want to put just a nominal amount in there, showing our commitment. And also, if we can start planning that 5-year, I think we should do it now. That's all I have at the moment. I think I'll have to rummage through the rest of the appendices, but that's all for now, Mr. Mayor.
Well, if you think of something else, then just let us know. So, if you want to go, you're up. Arliss, if not, I can go. Whatever you're more comfortable with.
Yeah, I can jump in. I've been trying to get these in some order, but I didn't. So, I'll just jump on that last comment because I had a note on community gardens as well. Since I joined the Parks Commission in 2017, I believe, and this has been a topic of discussion since then. I think the waiting list is above 90, maybe somewhere on that order, which may be as many spots as we have. Years ago, I took some tours of the community gardens, and I do actually think there's space for additional lots. There were, again, this was years ago, but at the time I toured, there were several, a good handful of sort of unused lots, even though they had been reserved. So people kind of had them reserved, but weren't actually using them. So I do think it'd be worth both looking at ways to acquire additional land for community gardens. Not every resident in the city has their own yard to be able to plant a garden, but also look at how we could maybe better utilize the space to increase the number of lots in our existing gardens. So, okay, that was one. All right, I'm just gonna go, I'm just gonna start here. Ooh. Okay, I wanna go back to the conversation about the outreach workers and kind of the reallocation of that support. And so as I understood the staff report and the discussion, the plan was to sort of reallocate from the tenant eviction support specifically to homelessness, housing navigation. And my thought in reading that was just like, why not support for sort of all things emergency housing. We've got folks facing evictions. We've got folks, for various reasons, looking for housing opportunities. I know there's like different rules on some of our fundings that's created some complications on like you can access these funds if you're not homeless yet, but you can only access those funds if you already are homeless. And it's just a lot of what I hear when I'm talking to people who are trying to access these funds is just how confusing it is to navigate. And if you take the wrong step, you may lose an opportunity for something. So is there any reason, any staff we have that are focused on sort of any kind of emergency housing support can't be the one-stop shop for Costa Mesa residents in terms of navigating those resources?
So I think our constituent services team does a really good job of trying to parse out when they speak to a resident that's struggling either with the need for rental assistance, a potential eviction, or when it's someone, they know who to point to be able to get the person the resources that they need. In the case of rental assistance, it's largely going to be our outside providers, right? And so it's going to be, Mercy House, Spin, Families Forward. And so those are sort of outbound referrals for families to get those resources. What we're talking about in the budget, though, is our own staff. They all have the same class, aside from constituent services, our outreach service workers have the same classification for that purpose, so that they could assist with multiple different things. But what we are experiencing, especially in our bridge shelter, is the need to really have much more focus on the housing navigation, on the case management ourselves. And so that's what we're recommending, is to redirect some of the resources now that with the tenant eviction protection, we have a good handle on it. The landlords are familiar, the community's familiar with the rules. Just being able to refocus and have some attention now on the housing navigation piece, because we do have people that are in the shelter for far too long, 12 months, 13 months. It's an issue that's been raised by the city of Newport Beach. They have had concerns about it. We've had concerns about it when we looked at the outcomes, and so that's the focus that we think we need to have in order to help more people that are on the street and be able to have better flow with our beds, right? We weren't intending it to be a 12-month stay for sure. And so I think the redirection of that resource will help to, really reduce the street homelessness that we see every day, while we still manage to continue to help on the prevention piece through constituent services, through our contractors, and through that kind of hands-on assistance that we have, our workshops with fair housing. And so we have a multi-pronged approach with different staff and across different disciplines. Even within development services, we have Mikkel, who works with grants, other grant funding, and CDBG and things like that to help families. And so we have different staff in different places, plus contractors that are helping with all of this. Mm-hmm. And so it's still providing a holistic array of services, but individualized for each person based on their specific circumstances.
Okay. I guess it's important that we're able to flex with where the need is. And also, when, we don't know, one of the challenges is we don't know the exact numbers, but we've, through our various studies over the last few years, we certainly know the numbers of people who are coming through our shelter. We know the percentages of people in the city who are struggling with housing. We've got, somewhat of a sense of evictions, but we learned in our last meeting, we don't really know what that number is, right? And so when I think of 3 outreach workers dedicated to the maybe 150 people who come through our shelter in a year compared to who we have to support the, maybe 50% of our 100,000 person population who's struggling with housing. I just want to make sure that we're, providing the support where it's going to be most impactful. So I don't know those numbers, but just something to think about. Also, I know at the county level, there's, regional resources being, assigned and sort of consortiums to help in all of these areas too. So I want to make sure we're really thoughtful in how we're plugging in and using those resources as well.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from a dollar standpoint, I think we're focusing on the FTE, but if you look at it from a dollar standpoint, we're spending millions of dollars on rental assistance and programs to prevent homelessness. Whereas the outreach workers are helping to move along the folks that we're spending the millions of dollars at the bridge shelter on.
Yeah, okay.
And so it's a significant investment from the city. We've
Yeah.
put millions of dollars into homelessness prevention, intervention, and
Is that additive to our contract with Mercy House, or would this be replacing it? Because isn't that
this would be a
that navigation
substitution.
supposed to be
Right.
part of
That would be
substitution?
this would be a substitution. This would be us taking this on because we have that direct connection with the clients, and Mercy House no longer providing that service potentially if this gets approved, and then
So we're taking
realignment.
over that role from the Mercy
Yeah.
House contract instead of adding to it.
Right.
Okay. Okay.
That's the
that's helpful to know.
recommendation.
Okay. 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 And I may have misread this, but do we have the real estate property manager? Did that get dropped from the department? What happened there?
So when we recruited for that position, we had an outstanding candidate that wanted to work from home. And so what we did is we entered into a contract. So we have that individual on contract, which is fantastic. We are able to utilize the services when we need it. We don't have a permanent full-time position. Very few people in this space that really know the complexity of real estate management, to be honest. And so we're able to utilize his services on a contract basis. So I pay for that basically out of the city manager's budget from basically piecing different things together. And so that real estate manager position, we weren't able to fill, but we did a contract instead.
Okay, that's great. I was concerned we were losing that and that was an important position in terms of the, looking for opportunities for community garden, park acquisition, as Councilmember Chavez and Harlan, I think, mentioned, and some other potential projects that we want to do. So I'm glad to hear that's still there.
Arliss, can I
Yeah.
follow up on that? So has that person been retained to do anything since?
Yeah, that person has been doing a few projects for us as we've been looking at different, it's helped with some litigation items that, I won't get into because those are closed session items, but he's been able to assist on a number of things, and he would be able to assist with any other acquisition, appraisals, assessed valuations, identification of parcels or lots for specific purposes. That's exactly what we retained him for.
Okay.
Sorry, to jump in real quickly. So given that this position revolves around real estate and anything vocal we say is going to be probably used against us, if we ever do a purchase or a sale, for example, what would be the best way to highlight for the staff parcels we think would be interesting for us to look into?
Yeah, he can, if we want him to look into opportunities for, you're saying for like land acquisition or parcel acquisition for park development, open space, yeah, we can have him look at that, for sure.
Do we have to, because again, I'm mindful of the fact that anytime we discuss something of that nature, we're showing our hand in a negotiation for assessing property. Is there like a method for us to demonstrate interest for certain parcels without us having?
Yeah, I think he can give us an assessment. We could tell him some parameters and we'll work with him on just getting the basic information. And then once we decide we want to negotiate, then that's a different phase when we get into the negotiation phase. But if we're talking about a data, sort of an inquiry process, I think that's fine. And it's not really showing our hand. If we can afford it, we can afford it. And if we can't, we can't. If there's a negotiation possibility, I know that at one point we had looked at some different parcels on the west side for a couple of things. And so he'd be great at that. That's his area of expertise, and he could narrow down some opportunities for us.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm very interested in that as well. And if it's not already been given the green light to do that, I think, my next series of questions are going to be about the open space master plan. But, I think there's no reason to start looking at opportunities to build open space, green space, park space where we're missing it in the city. So I think that should be on his roster if it's not already. I actually have one more question. I think falls in the city manager department. So we funded in a previous year our climate action and adaptation plan. I know for various reasons that's been delayed. I understand. I'm still disappointed, but I understand that why we're not seeing new CIP projects in that area this year. We've got a backlog of projects that need to get done. But two questions, is that something, what is our plan to get that done, the climate action adaptation plan? And then two, what is our plan, like, are we still in a position and have a plan to pursue a huge amount of climate-related funding opportunities from both the state and federal governments?
Yes and yes. So I think on the climate action adaptation plan, we did issue the RFP. We had the scope of service. We had some respondents, and I think interviews are being set up to conduct the interviews of, is it 3 finalists, Raja? Or how many firms did you want to, without getting into names?
Yeah, we received 3 proposals and we'll be interviewing shortly.
Right, and so hopefully we'll be bringing a contract to council soon to get that started, once we go through that process. And then I think Cecilia will take the lead on the implementation with development services, because there's such an overlap there. And then in terms of all of the different grant opportunities, we have Jay Barkman now, thankfully, our government relations manager, who's tasked with looking at these grant opportunities. And so we'll be working with him to kind of identify, I know you wanted to set up some time to go through some opportunities that are out there for additional funding, and then working with the team to see where we can plug and play different grants for different needs, whether it's electrification of the city's fleet, which we've been looking at. But if there are opportunities there, we're happy to pursue that and in other areas as well.
Okay, and I forgot to look at this in the 5-year, but I'll put a follow-up note to review whether it makes sense to add anything to the 5-year to help position us for those grants. You know, some ideas were mentioned in the previous CIP study session. Okay, parks and community services. Are we going to finish the open space master plan? Or what is the plan to finish that? And the reason I ask, well, one, this is another thing that started when I was on the Parks Commission back in 2017. Just really eager to see that done. But two, that not being done, I think, has been used as a reason to push back other projects, which is, I don't want to see that excuse happen anymore. So I'd love to see that get done. There's some key pieces of that plan that we added on, you know, really identifying neighborhoods in the city that don't have good walkable access to parks. I think we really need to get that on paper to help develop a plan. And I 100% agree with Councilmember Chavez's comments about, you know, having a sort of more informed systemic approach to how we're maintaining and developing parks going forward. So we're not just sort of responding based on ad hoc or squeaky wheel or whatever it is. So do we have a plan to get that plan done?
Yes. And so I'll share that much of what's contained in the original, in the draft that's been provided is old, outdated information. A lot of the projects have already been implemented. So I think what I would suggest is we have Brian work with PACS on that draft, develop some recommendations for council, but I would guess that we probably need to update that plan, bring it current, is my guess. I think from my review of the plan, the takeaways weren't very clear in terms of next steps. I think it needs a serious refresh. I think it would be good to memorialize what's happened. A lot of the recommendations have already been implemented, but if we really want it to be a forward-looking plan, I think it's going to need a reinvestment of funds. And so I think one of the things that we had talked about was putting in additional funding to have that plan updated, if you will, or revised, and bring it current with another 5-year outlook, just to take into account what's already happened and then what we think needs to happen going forward. We didn't have the $16.5 million, so a lot of the recommendations around Ketchum Libel, Shalimar, even Fairview Park, things like that. But also working with a different framework, I think, for the recommendations would be my recommendation. And I think we can put together something for the adopted budget for your consideration where we set aside some additional funds to see that through. But PACS may have a different recommendation. That was my take from taking a look at it. I think it would be good for PACS to drill down and give you some recommendations. But Brian's taken a look at it too, and I think we're on the same page.
Okay. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I think tasking PACS with that would be great. The pieces I've been waiting for are the kind of again, neighborhood analysis of what areas of the city don't have good walkable access to a park, which we had talked about several times in the last 7 years, I think it's been. More than that. Where can someone walk to a park? Where can a kid walk to a park, for example, and not have to cross a major road? There's still quite a few neighborhoods, west side and east side, that are missing that. And then we've talked more recently about a sort of a park equity assessment. There's some frameworks for that. That's a 5 to 10K job that could probably just get done.
Yeah.
That I think would be a really good framework to start thinking about the more systemic approach to park improvements.
Agreed. And I'll just share with you that when we bring plans to you, we don't want to bring a plan without a plan for funding. And so right now, that plan is a lot of data, I would say, doesn't really have a concrete plan for funding. And so I think it needs that aspect too. Whatever that is, however it is that we decide that gets funded, but it needs to have some recommendations and some forward thinking on how we could plan something going forward in terms of park development.
Okay. Another thing I've mentioned in the past that I'd love to look into, and I think this could be a very small ad, but this is really supporting community-driven special events. Right now, anyone in the community wants to do a special event larger than kind of family and friends, has to pay usually a $500 special events fee. There's a long process. If you want to do, sometimes there's insurance requirements. I know that our process and fees have created barriers that have prevented events from happening. So thinking about what kind of support or framework can we do to help events like that? I've mentioned before, the NEAT summer movie in the park. We know we are working with a community member now who's doing an event in Canyon Park. I think those are really good opportunities for community building, which we know to be a strong driver of kind of good community relationships. It's events that our staff don't have to put on, even though certainly there's some support in putting them together. But so small, fun to do some small special events. I saw that Santa Ana did this, I think, last year in their budget, and I think that'd be really interesting and valuable to pursue. Okay, let's go to Public Works. The facility needs assessment. I'm really excited to see this get done. I saw there's I thought we had funded that already, and I saw that there's some additional funds. If I'm misunderstanding that, can you explain? Or otherwise, what is the scope for that? Why does it need more funding?
Councilor Reynolds, it wasn't funded before, so this is the first time we're asking for funding for the facility needs assessment study.
Oh, okay.
So we'll be working on a scope of work. It's basically going through all the different facilities and looking at both short-term and long-term improvements that can be made. And this is another place where we will bring sustainability into focus too. So what improvements we can do that are energy efficient and such.
Perfect. Okay. I guess we've talked about it so much, I assumed it was already funded. Will that facilities assessment include parks?
No, this one doesn't include parks.
Okay.
There's a separate program for park assessments that we'll be looking into. It's not in the CIP. It's going to be covered as a separate project.
Okay. Is that in our budget?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
In the operational
It's
budget?
in the 401 fund, the capital fund.
Okay. Okay. Great. I don't know which department this falls in. I'd written down on page 31, fines and forfeitures. So parking citations, I'm going from memory now, I think was around $800,000, a pretty big increase from previous years. And I was curious what's the source of that assumption? And my concern about this, the reason that it pops out to me is some previous analysis we had done shown that our citations really center in a few communities, primarily the West Side, primarily District 4. And one of the reasons for that is the kind of the way we've put up our signs. We really only enforce certain parking citations in certain areas of the city, which has always just felt very unfair. And it makes me very uncomfortable to know that we're budgeting for it, $800,000 on our community members. That's enforced in what feels to me an unfair way. So where does the 800 come from? And do we have any sort of plans to enforce in a more equitable way so we're not really pushing that budget? What concerns me about budgeting for it is that, at the end of the year, if we haven't enforced enough, are we going to go do extra enforcement to make sure we're getting that revenue in place? How do we plan for this?
Let me answer that for you. The 800,000 is currently what we're tracking to the current year. I also track during the year bottom line. So we will see fluctuations even throughout these numbers. So if we see a decline, I'm not too concerned because I know we'll find some increases somewhere else. We do not proactively go out and cite just to get to this number. It's just based on where we're seeing the trends currently, and so we'll budget that, and then we'll continue tracking it during the year.
Okay.
And we do, on the revenue side, I do budget very conservatively, so I'm very comfortable with the bottom line number.
And do we know why that number's tracking higher?
I would have to defer that question. But currently, what I'm seeing, we're seeing an increase. For the citations, that would be...
Well, remember we had suspended for some time during COVID, and then a little while after COVID as well, so this is the more normalized revenue amount.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things I know we suspended for a short time was not citing people on street sweeping day after the street sweeper had passed, which seemed like a fair policy. I've been hearing some complaints, just residents saying like, this really seems unfair. I don't know where else to park. I move my car from the street sweeper, and then, I park behind it, so I know I'm not in its way, and they'll still get a ticket, even an hour after the street sweeper has passed. I've heard of tickets even like minutes before the street sweeping window closes, which just, for the residents who feel very frustrated when that happens, totally understand, right? You're doing your best to find somewhere to go. And if that's one of the reasons for our uptick, I just really want to implore that we find a better solution for that when so many residents don't have a place, really options otherwise. So maybe a look at where those citations are coming from. If we're still in a situation where most of our citations are centered on some of our the neighborhoods where it's really, really hard to pay those bills. Let's please try to look at alternative ways than charging our residents.
We'll take another look at the statistics, yeah.
There was a very small line item that I was really curious about. It was, I think, about $30,000 on a red light camera. I didn't think we had any more. Do we still have a red light camera that issues citations? So what is that $30,000? I think that's also on page 31.
I can get back to you, but we are still receiving revenues in this particular line, and I can dig into exactly why it's being posted there.
Okay. I think it's still, Chief, you could just nod or shake your head. It's still, we're not allowed by state law to have red light cameras. Is that correct? Okay. Well, there's some pilots to maybe bring that back into play. Okay. Yeah, if we can figure out what that is, that'd be helpful. Okay, I think I've been avoiding. Let's go to planning and development services. So first of all, in the big book, in the development services department, I guess it's page 177 has the org chart. Should this reflect, I thought in a fairly recent council meeting, we created some new positions to kind of break apart advanced planning from some more of the operational work. Should that be reflected in this org chart here, or did I misunderstand that?
You didn't misunderstand it. We just didn't break it out, but we can do that. That's easy.
Okay, but that's intended to be kind of to
Yes,
distinct departments,
organizationally,
right? Where
yeah.
one's really focused on sort of streamlining the regular
Correct.
operations, and the other one's doing the, I guess both can be fun, but the broader visioning and rezoning work. Okay, okay. Yeah, I would appreciate that being broken out. I think that's a valuable way to see the distinct work in that department. This is an area I was surprised. I know we've added positions throughout the year, and maybe the vacancies are high right now, but I was surprised to not see additional positions in planning and development services, given our very high priority to build housing, help, whether it's affordable housing or new housing, supporting single family, supporting multifamily developments. I think we want to see that happen. We've got a lot of projects, 47, 49 programs in our housing element that need to get done. And it's really, really important to me, I think to others on council, that we've got a solid plan and the staffing and resources to get through that work. Do we think we've got the sufficient staffing now, or do you think you're going to be coming soon, in a month or so with some additional requests? Where are we on that?
We won't be coming in a month, that's for sure. I think, so just in the last 12 months, I can just think of 3 positions that we added off the
Right.
top of my head. The senior planner that's helping with tenant eviction protection, but also does other work. That second sustainable, planning and sustainable manager position that we created, you just did that maybe a month ago at mid-year.
Yeah.
And then the building tech position as well. And so,
With all of the resources in this budget and previously approved, do we think that that's enough to get us through the housing element programs and support all of our housing goals?
I
for
think
next
at the
couple years?
moment, right, at the moment. And so I think we're going to continue to monitor it as we go. But in terms of what we can afford at the moment, the workload that we have at the moment, we think this is what we need to get those programs off and running.
Okay, I see Cecilia leaning forward, but you're also nodding. And I just want to, again, I think I said this multiple times, like invite you to tell us what you need to get this work moving. It's still, housing stability, people being able to live here without being rent burdens, providing the housing so we can reduce the crowding, really provide stable housing in the city. It feels like the most urgent thing we can do. We've done a lot of very, very, very good work on the, almost like the triaging of it, right? Working on homelessness, keeping people housed when they're getting evicted or, dealing with other challenges, but now really, really being able to lean into how we build more housing quickly. I just want to make sure that we're well positioned to that. We're not holding ourselves back by, not asking for resources, because I think we want to put those resources in place.
Yeah, so I don't want to suggest that we know 100% without a shadow of a doubt that this is the staffing that we need. But what we can say, and what I can say comfortably as your city manager, is I feel like this is the staffing level that we can support at this time. So while there are cities that today might be doing a presentation about the 10%, 5%, 15% cuts and deficits that they have, which we know San Diego's doing that today or soon, Orange is, maybe San Francisco and a few others, we're not in a deficit scenario, and it's because we budget conservatively, strategically, incrementally, and sustainably. And so while it may not be a huge increase, there's at least 3 positions that we've added just in the last 2-3 months. We've added positions even before then. And so I think this is what we can comfortably afford now without making other adjustments in other areas. If things go well, we might come back mid-year, right? And if we can, actually afford a couple more positions 6 months from now. But given what's happening with the economy, I think this is what we felt we could comfortably support. And it's 3 more than just, 4 months ago. And so we're hoping that, and we were strategic about where it's placed. That building tech position we knew was a bottleneck, if you will. And so we knew to do that. And then separating out advanced planning from current planning, I think is going to make a big difference, along with Tessa. And then we'll come back as we go. But I'd be concerned about just adding positions without really having a plan or a thought process behind it and not being able to fund it and coming back to you in 6 months and with a layoff plan. And so
Yeah, and there may be other mechanisms. I think there's sort of two parts to this. One is we have a study session coming up specifically on our housing plan. Is that right? Because it's July. Okay.
Right, July, yeah.
I know that'll be here before we know it. Feels far away. But I really want to have a clear picture of how we are moving forward with all of our programs, how we are addressing the specific needs in our community related to housing. I think I know some of it really well because we've been in the weeds on the homelessness program, for example, but how we're doing the visioning, rezoning, and other parts of the housing element. I really want to have a good understanding of how we're improving the processing time on housing projects that come before us, how we can proactively work with housing developers who have ideas for projects that are housing element sites, for example. Totally understand and appreciate the thoughtfulness on kind of long-term fiscal sustainability. We do have a lot in our housing plan and priorities that are sort of one-time things, right? The rezoning of the city is not something that we're going to do, hopefully, every 2 years, but we really, really, really want to get that done in a short term so that we can stimulate necessary housing construction. So I don't know what the different mechanisms are, but it seems to me that there's got to be a way for some short-term staffing, whether it's I don't know how it works. I know there's rules in government, but how can we sort of get over the hump of a lot of short-term sort of necessary work related to planning and development services over the next few years that doesn't necessarily need to be carried on, right? We're making up for a lot of lost time, and I don't think a lot of our residents don't have time to sort of slow roll that. So,
I think having, bringing Cecilia on board, I think gives us a lot of expertise in this area that'll help guide decision-making moving forward. When we bring the new development services director,
Yep.
we'll really be leaning on that expertise as well, or when that position gets filled. And then, I think we'd be in a better position to actually have a more concrete plan. The consultants right now are playing a key role too, and we can plug and play with the consultants in terms of always in development services when you have increases in development or you have an increase in projects, flexing the contracts, right, based on the ability and the need is also key without, bringing on full staff that then you later have to let go because you don't need them. So I think the contracts play a special role here. And so I think as we move forward, we'll continue to monitor it. We understand. I mean, we're basically tasked with this, and we're going to deliver on it. I think, at the moment, I think between the consultants that we have, the new positions we've brought on board over the past few years, not just in the past 4 months, but over the past few years, we've really increased the staffing. I think when we look at the TOO, we can see that as well. And once we get the director position filled and having Cecilia on board, I think, we'll be in a better position to say if we need more staff, what classifications they are and what they be working on. And so we commit to that, yeah.
So just following up on that, I share Arliss's concerns about staffing levels, but I look at it from a slightly different perspective in that looking at the revenue projections for the proposed budget. So, for example, park development fees, which seem to be $100,000. I don't know if that's just a placeholder, but last year it was $328,000. And then building permits, construction permits, electrical permits, plan check fees, zoning variance, CUP, those all seem to be relative to the last 3 fiscal years very flat. So is that our projection, that we're anticipating the same level of development in fiscal year 24-25?
At this time, yes, we are anticipating essentially a flat revenue stream on all of the permit fees.
And what is that based on?
Based on some things that we're seeing, we know that in development services, we're continually, working and building in new permits. However, we do see a reduction in the home improvement area. So that kind of levels itself off to essentially be flat. So even though we have seen some development and we have a couple of development projects, big projects coming on board, for example, in the next year or two, maybe one Metro West, we'll start having some of that. But those are one-time large. But for our ongoing, is essentially flat at this time, our ongoing permit processing.
Okay.
All right. Carlos, do you have a lot more, or?
Just a few more, yeah, thanks. Okay, and just to close the loop on that, again, I understand we're important vacancy in the, in the director of that department, but I think council reaffirmed at our recent sort of strategy session that like housing, we've got to figure out how we're moving that plan forward, and just want to invite you all again to be creative as possible in terms of the staffing or resources to get that get that moving as quickly as possible, because that's stable housing is the foundation of health and safety, I think, in the city for our residents. Okay, then just a few. Last set of comments is related to public works and some specific projects. So on the projects front, I think I've already reiterated my support for the interest in having fund aid for West Side Park development. We did actually create that fund in, I think it was 2017, for the purpose that we've discussed today, building a 2017, 2018. We created that when I was on council in my first couple of years. Specifically to be able to have a bucket of funds ready to purchase land when it becomes available. So I'm glad we've got the staff person assigned to that. I really want to, we stopped funding that in COVID. I think we've delayed some of funding that maybe related to the open space master plan. I don't know. I don't want to stop funding that anymore. We really need to make sure that we're putting money in a pot for filling the gaps in terms of park space. I was reminded recently that, it is in our general plan and open space policies to make sure we have a certain amount of acreage per person, and we're pretty deficient on that. So having clear, putting, our money where our mouth is on that, I think is very important to me. In the 5-year, another item that I think would be valuable to throw in there again to help position us for potential funds, I didn't see anything related to transit shelters. We've been talking recently about, lack of shelters, benches, shade, even lighting at our transit stops. I know we're working through an updated contract on that. But I am seeing more and more, again, state and federal grants related to buses. So having, some kind of placeholder in the 5-year to say, hey, we do care about transit, that might help us position us for grants, I think would be beneficial. Question for Director Sethuraman. Wilson Street west of Placentia. This was a funded CIP project, and we kind of swooped in and grabbed some of those funds a couple years ago for a different project. Has that been refunded, or what is the plan to put that back in place? I had had several conversations with the Wilson School principal on that project in particular, because they're interested in opportunities to improve safety on that street.
So, Councilman Reynolds, that will be part of our citywide street improvements. So we evaluate all our streets every 2 years to see how the levels of the pavement condition is, and based on that, it gets prioritized. So we'll look at. We recently completed our pavement management study, so we'll take a look at that and see if that can be added to the list of projects.
Okay, but the project we had previously funded, you're saying has not have been refunded yet?
Yes, that project that was previously funded and got reassigned was the CDBG portion of that project. We still have some money of the CIP that's left over, but we need to add some more funds to that. And we have money in the citywide street improvements, but when we'll evaluate based on the need for that improvement at this point, and then we'll take care of that.
Okay. Okay, and then I've just got to say it, I think I say this every budget year, all the items on the 5-year that have road widening projects, I'd like to see removed. I think most of those widening projects would require acquiring private land. I don't think we want to acquire any private land for more roads. There's a lot of evidence to show that expanding roads only creates more traffic. It only takes 4 years on average, I think. And I'd really like our focus to be on mode shift and not just creating more space for cars. I think we have to do that as part of our housing plan as well. And that actually, okay, this will be my last comment. One other maybe position or plan that I wish we had in here was related to this need for MoShift and really good coordination between our planning team on the rezoning efforts and our transportation team. I still think those departments are too siloed. We've got folks on the second floor who are going to be visioning and rezoning our city, and then folks on the fourth floor who are doing all the plans for our streets. And I don't know that I haven't heard that we've got a clear plan for those two folks to work together. I think the transportation work needs to be done in concert with urban planners, and got to find a way for that to happen without slowing down all of the necessary work that we're doing on making our streets safer for all users. So love to see a solution there if we can get it. And I still think Public Works needs its own PIO. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. I have a number of questions. I'd just like to congratulate everyone on getting halfway through the study session. First of all, before I start on my Costa Mesa specific stuff, I'd like everybody to put this whole budget presentation into its proper perspective and look at where we are relative to where we could be if we didn't have the expertise that we have in the city at every level, departmental and especially in finance, and especially with the expertise that we get from our city manager who comes through the finance department. So as some of you may have read, there's another city. So I don't know if everybody knows this statistic, but we're the 8th largest city in the county of Orange. The 7th largest city in the county of Orange is the city of Orange. The city of Orange, by contrast to the presentation that we've had today, is suffering a tremendous downturn and tremendous budget issues. They have a $19 million deficit that they're dealing with. They're talking about putting a tax increase on the budget. Here's a quote from their city manager. I'm just reading from the Voice of OC. This is a quote. We've recovered from the recession. We've never recovered from the recession. We kind of were just putting a Band-Aid on it. Now we've run out of Band-Aids and we're still bleeding. The city of Orange is considering cutting their library. Chief, you'll be interested in this, leaving 20 positions in the police department vacant, reducing park cleanups, and to some of Arliss's comments about events, canceling special events, including, and there is a solution to this, their 3rd of July event. So if you're listening in Orange, we will be happy to see you here at our 3rd of July event. I bring that up not to bash on Orange, which is a wonderful city. It's one of the first cities that was incorporated in the county. And of course, it's Orange, and we're Orange County after all. But just to say, what they go on to say in that article, if you wish to read it, is over 10 years, they've kind of ignored these budgetary issues and they haven't responded to them. And here, by contrast, in the city of Costa Mesa, through the team that I identified, when we have an issue, we address it right away, and we anticipate whether or not we can have an issue. You just heard it with our city manager saying, well, we don't want to bring that in because we're not sure. We don't want to come back to you in 6 months saying we can't fund it. These are all, we cannot take this for granted. For the last few years, I've said to Carol, boy, this is a clean budget. Boy, this is great. It hasn't always been that way in the city of Costa Mesa, but it's not that way. Huntington Beach is having a hard time balancing their budget. There's a lot of cities in Orange County that are. And so the fact that we can do so well and have a balanced budget and increase in fund reserves is a testament, by the way, not just to staff, but as Carol mentioned, we have 12,000 businesses that have licenses, and of course they underpay for their business license. But in return, what we get is a tremendous sales tax base. And I would say for a city of our size, we're the strongest sales tax-based economy in Orange County, and that was proven through the recession. So that's all I have to say about that. I want to, though, note something, and like sometimes I'm just going to talk. I'm not going to ask questions if that's okay. So if you look at the increase of the line that was shown by Carol in the increase of our property tax, taxes, and you might say, well, that's lovely, right? We get more property taxes. Isn't that nice? We've got such great revenue here. But I don't think we always recognize the relationship between the increase in property taxes, which is an increase in our property values, good if you're a homeowner, and good if you're trying to collect money, but it does create a lot of costs and a lot of, pain, let's face it, in our community. And the costs come in all of these outreach programs that we've identified, 7 or 8 outreach workers, depending on how you want to look at it, $2.5 million going into affordable housing fund, the rental relief programs. I'm sure you read about this. Andrea posted it. It's going around. It's been covered by the Orange County Register that to buy a house now in the county of Orange, you have to have an income of $350,000. 11% of the people in the county of Orange can afford a home. So then you might say, well, then why are we building these? There are some ownership projects that are starting to move forward. We're getting some headway with that. There's at least one project over at TBN that is moving forward. But so why on earth would we build rental housing? That doesn't seem to make sense, but it does, because there's a real phenomenon in not just in Orange County but throughout the country that large Wall Street funds are buying single-family homes for the purposes of renting them, and the reason they're doing it is quite simple. Wall Street is it has no heart, it has no soul. It follows the money, right? And a scarcity in rental housing will be filled by buying single-family homes, raising the price of those homes so people cannot have ownership opportunities. So as we come up here and we talk about housing policies, it's kind of like a little bit, I will say, and I don't mean this to be pejorative, but it's a little bit myopic to say, in order to allow for ownership opportunities, we need to build ownership houses and we don't build rental houses. Well, it's all kind of intertwined in the economy. And I think I've tied this to the budget in terms of the property taxes and the costs that we have in our budget as a result of the housing crisis. We had an item, without getting into a lot of detail, that came up, and it's going to come before us, so I don't want to get into a lot of detail, but it had to do with One Metro West, which is really the only, it came up before the Planning Commission yesterday, and it's the only hope that we have of creating any substantial development in the next 5 years of actually increasing our housing stock. And what I think we should be, as Jeff pointed out, if you look at these flat fees, flat park fees, flat development fees, flat permit fees, those are a very clear symptom of no housing being built, right? So, Arliss makes a great point, and I have made that point many times, and I agree that we have to staff up in our development department so we're ready for all these developers. But we also have to attract these developers. And the way we attract these developers, and I think it's a little counterintuitive when we talk about revenue and budgets and stuff like that, is to actually cut our fees to increase the development of housing. And by cutting our fees, oddly enough, we may be having a net benefit in terms of our budget, but more importantly, in terms of our residents' household budgets, we're going to make a big difference. So I think we should look into that, this idea of incentives. And I've said it, and I'll bring it up in other contexts too, and I said it at our strategy session. I think we need to have a committee that does nothing but look at these issues about how can we develop more units, how can we reduce the cost of housing? How can we get people off the streets? I'm sure you all read that over the county, and we're going to go in and talk to the county people on Thursday about this, the city manager and I, the point in time count for homelessness is up in the county of Orange and also in the city of Costa Mesa, despite all our efforts, which I consider heroic and successful. And I can't even imagine where we would be without those, to be sure. But we're still not reducing the level of homelessness, and it's because of this housing issue. So, to that I say yes. I say yes to Arliss's suggestion of buttressing our departments. I say yes to looking at incentives to cut fees so that people can come in, and I say yes to getting the best minds on this dais and in the Planning Commission and the community together to focus on this issue as being our highest priority going forward. I really thought it was insightful for Manny to talk about TOT tax for a couple of reasons. It's too late for us to get that on the ballot in 2024. It doesn't make any sense. We can't do it. But as 2026 comes up, and as we look forward to the 2028 LA Olympics, that's a great opportunity to capture a lot of TOT tax and going forward. And Lorianne and I serve on the Travel Costa Mesa board, and you'd think that the hoteliers would be opposed to increasing the TOT tax because it's going to increase the slip that they charge their guests, but they're really not, because it's a question of equilibrium. We should be at the same level as Anaheim and some of our neighboring cities, and we're not. We're behind that. And what that means, as Manny pointed out, is we're leaving money on the table that people that are not residents that come into our city could pay to pay for some of the things that we're talking about, some of the street improvements that Arliss advocates for so well, and some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in a moment. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It's something to think about going forward, not in this budget, obviously, and maybe not in the 2024 election, but something to look at going forward. Okay, so now I want to take a little tour through it's a famous topic of mine, and this is not a joke. I'm dead serious. This is a famous topic of mine. I'm going to go through the big book. Okay, we're going to start on page 33, which is the general fund and sources of funds. And there's a line item under use of money and property. It's the second to the last, or as Jeff would say, the penultimate line item. It reads golf course operations. And it has the number there on the line item is $3,925,073, almost $4 million. That's the line item. Okay. Now I'm here to tell you that I go over to the golf course from time to time, as you know, and there's a new superintendent over there who's doing terrific work. I've brought senior staff over to the golf course. And I think that there's work that needs to be done on the bunkers. We're leaving a lot of money on the table in food and beverage. It looks like it hasn't changed since 1975, since the Carter administration. And it's $4 million of our budget. Now I look at the narrative for the different departments, and I do this every year, and there is a little bit of an improvement, I must say. Now I'm on page 117 of the big book. And I'm in the narrative of the Parks and Community Services Department. And to my happiness, I guess, there is one reference, because I've talked to Director Brian Gruner about this, how this is going to be part of his department. And there is a reference in the area, the kind of the lead-in paragraph. It does say it's part of the list. It says the Costa Mesa Country Club. That's it. That's the only time you'll see it. It's not part, unlike Fairview Park, the Downtown Rec Center, the Balearic Center, youth sports, blah, 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 which are all great. I mean, tennis has its own little paragraph. The Rocks program has its paragraph. The teen programs have their paragraph. All are great programs. Concerts have their great. Mobile recreation, all great programs. But the community gardens, Jeff's thing, community gardens has its own little paragraph. But the the asset of the city that brings $4 million into the city doesn't even get a paragraph. It's just like, what do you call it? Red buttons. You remember that, Tom? Never had a dinner, right? He never had a dinner. So now let's go and look at some other stuff in the budget. I've been talking about this, by the way, since 2017. So no offense to anybody who worked on this particular budget. You're in good company. Now you look at page 24 of the big book, and you look at the Golf Course Improvement Fund, 413, and you go across, and it says estimated revenues in 2024-25, $110,000. $110,000. By the way, if you do the math, that's about 2.5% of the revenue. And proposed operating expenditures in this budget, $50,000. So that's 1.25% of the revenue that the golf course derives. This was discussed at FIPAC, and when we had a budget, we had a surplus, and FIPAC looked at it. It was the number one thing that they said that we should focus on, because FIPAC, the group of citizens that look into this stuff and really analyze it and drill down, they said, well, wait a minute, the golf course gives you revenue. All these other programs, well, quite worthy, and I'm not suggesting that that even a dollar be cut from any of them, but they don't return revenue to us. Some of them cover the costs. So what am I saying now for the 8th year, I think, is let's invest in the golf course. There's one other story I'll tell you, which is a true story, but if it's not true, somebody will correct me. Back in 2009, so a percentage under our agreement with Mesa Verde Partners, a percentage of the revenue goes into a fund. We just looked at it, a golf course improvement fund. And back in 2009, when we were having trouble with our budget, the city council, presumably at the request of staff, agreed to take a portion of that and put it into the general fund to help cover the general expenses of the city. We've been doing that continuously since 2009. So essentially, the Golf Course Improvement Fund has been giving an interest-free loan to the general fund for 15 years. So what I say is just simply we have an opportunity. It's one of the only income-producing assets of the city. We have an opportunity to improve it. We can then make more money that will go over $4 million, will provide a better service to our community. You can't hardly even get on the course now. And it brings people in the community, it serves the community, and if we had things like what they're talking about over there as ideas is create a whole environment over at the driving range. The driving range, if we went over right now, you wouldn't be able to get on the driving range. And that's the way it is until 9 o'clock at night. If you went in tomorrow, and as soon as it gets light at 5:45, people are hitting balls. So from 5:45 till 9 o'clock at night, people in the community are using that course, and we're proposing in this budget to pay $50,000 to improve it. I don't think that's proportionate. I just don't. I think it's pretty obvious. So then the only other thing I have, I think I've been clear about the golf course. I don't think I need to say anything more than that. I would really like to see, and I know it's a study session, in the next draft of this, when we're voting on it, right, I would like to see a commitment to improving the golf course. We have people over there we can talk to, we can do it, we can get ideas, and we can allocate funds this fiscal year to do that.
Mayor, I just wanted to clarify, on page 242, so I think what you're referring to is operating expenditures, the numbers that you're referring to.
Okay, and did I miss something? Are we going to put a lot of money into the golf course?
Yes.
In this fiscal year?
Yes.
See how it's great? So
well, it's ongoing.
I ask and I get it.
I think it's the ongoing
242?
amount, right? So I think there's on page 242, there's the 750,000 from previous years. And then I know that from the year-end fund balance, when we took the money that we had left over after the audit, FIPAC recommended to have the tennis center improvement and this. So I think that's on page 242, 750,000.
And so how much of that are we going to spend that this year in this fiscal budget?
It's appropriated.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
appropriated to be spent.
So how come it says $50,000 on that other line?
Because the other spreadsheet, it's proposed operating expenditures. And so you'll see that even the capital improvement fund, right, it only shows $200,000. Because this is just, if you look above, it's proposed operating expenditures. The capital expenditures are in the CIP.
Okay.
The operating expenditures are in this front part of the budget. It's just a technical thing.
Okay, so we're going to spend $750,000 at the
Yes,
golf course?
Yes, I didn't want you to walk away tonight thinking it's the $50,000.
I'm glad that you don't have,
Yeah.
then, yeah, no, that's great. You know what, I've never been so happy to be wrong in my life.
Actually, it's a little bit more. There's a couple of CIP
There's more.
projects related.
There's a couple more.
Yeah, there's 300,000 for the country club cart path, and then there was a 1.2 million that's split between the golf course and the tennis center. So
And Roger, that's going to happen in this fiscal year.
it's about 1.6 million.
So we have.
It's
we have-
appropriated
we
this
have-
fiscal year.
It's going to be happening this fiscal year?
As City Manager mentioned, it's appropriated, and we'll make every effort to start working on it. But, it depends on how the projects that we currently are already working on, how they, how much we can get done with those projects.
Okay.
But we have the funding to start working on them, and
And you know too, Roger, that we need a lot more than $750,000 to do what I'm talking about.
You have three
Yes.
pots, so it's number 85.
So we have about 1.5 or 1.6 million dollars in that range between the three projects that are here.
85, 91. So if you look at project number 85, number 91, and number 98.
98.
Half
Yeah.
of 90.
Are these page numbers
I'm
you're asking?
sorry. We're still on page 242.
242.
And 243. So, yeah.
So 80,
Yeah, project number 85.
okay, that's good. That's
The
750. What's the next one?
91.
Cart paths, I like that.
And then 98.
And what's the next one? 98?
Half of 98.
Half
yeah.
of 98.
Oh, half of 98.
Yeah.
1.6.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
1.2 there.
Okay.
And
600,000
I've been working with the golf course, with Mesawadi partners, especially on the cart paths. I did meet with them. He wants to improve the bunkers. He wants to improve the cart paths, and there's a mechanism for them to do the project, and we'll reimburse them too. So,
That's great.
So we are working on that program.
And let's do the thing at the driving range too. That'll cost us probably, I think, a couple $100,000, but it'll be a lot of extra revenue.
I'll talk to him about the driving range too, but we did pay for the netting. For example, a lot of the netting, we had to increase the number of, amount of netting around the golf course. We paid for that already.
All right. Okay, we're going. And what about, and so what are we doing for the food and beverage?
So that's a separate project. So that will require redesign of the restaurant over there, and that's something that we will be working down the road.
Because that still is, you've been over there,
Yes,
right? I took
yes.
Cecilia over there. Lorianne won't go there anymore with me anymore. Anyway, they've got a good menu over there, but it needs a lot of work.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. That's good. That takes care of about half of my rant.
Thank you.
Okay. There's only one last thing I have to say, and that has to more with Lauren than anything else. Jeff and I went to an event down in Buena Park. I don't think I've really talked too much to staff about it, so I might as well do it publicly now. It's called the Redo Market.
Dana Point.
Sorry, Dana Point. What did I say? Buena Park? Dana Point. And it was really good. And it would be a great thing to do I know Lauren has been looking at an event at Randolph Street, Randolph and Bristol. It's a event that happens every twice a year there. It doesn't have to happen twice a year here, maybe once a year. But if you talk to the folks at Dana Point, it's really something that would bring the community together and enliven that part of the city, which is already a great part of the city. But to get people there and to see the new improvements, including the work that we've done to Randolph Street, which is an award-winning project for Public Works, that'd be great. Okay. Anybody want a second bite of the apple?
Weren't kidding about the second half.
I wasn't. I know I went on long, but that's all right. By the way, one last thing I'll leave you with. I'm sure that this was unintentional. Carol, did you know that? Did you know that there's actually a song entitled "When We All Pull Together"? Did you know that? It's a gospel song, and let's work on it for the next meeting. All right, we're adjourned.
Mayor, I do.
Yeah,
Sorry.
okay, yeah, sorry.
I forgot to acknowledge, thanks to staff on changing the icons. I've been asking for this for years and years and years. Those ones were so outdated, so I was thrilled. It was the first place I looked when I got the book, and I was thrilled to see the new icons. So good job.
All right, thanks, everybody. Great job.